Just like that, 3, 2, 1. And we aren't playing the intro music today, but one day, honestly, so before I started this podcast, I was looking for music to find for this.
Yes.
And your music was actually in the mix, but then I was like, oh no, copyright infringement, all that sort of stuff. And also, so the person that I have on sitting right next to me to chat, when I did a list of people that I wanted to interview, your name was, I think, about the second. You're definitely that person. And back in 2017 when I knew you, I took a photo with you because I was like, one day this photo will mean something and I'll be able to post it up on my story and be like, remember that time when this happened? And I have that proof there. But today's guest is Jenny Mitchell. Thank you so much for coming on.
That's okay, thank you.
No, I really appreciate you coming on. Like I said, I actually have been a fan first, and obviously getting to know you as a student coming through. And just actually properly listening to your music. Not one of those things where I went and listened just so I can talk to you here, but just being a big fan. So ever since Let Me Be, that was one of my jams. I've told you the story, but I played that. Well, it was part of my Spotify play, like it was in my playlist, and it came on at the gym once. And you know, usually that kind of slower, I'm in that upper beat, like boom, boom, and then that one came on, and I honestly wasn't mad. I just like thought about it for a bit, and I was like, nah, that's fine. So that was cool. And just another one, just to keep it all coming on for you. But your new live sessions that were out. So on my Spotify, it was one of the latest things that I had downloaded. So I've just been flying recently, and it was like some of the only music that I had downloaded on my phone. And being in a window seat, being able to listen to you sing, it was just really, really cool. So Thank you for all of that. I hope you're feeling some love right now, just to know that I am a fan first, and I'm so stoked to have you on. So I appreciate it big time. Now, to get into everything that you've been into, you start somewhere. And I think a lot of the times when people do talk to you, it's kind of like, where are you in your phase of the music? But there's kind of been a long journey, I guess, of all of it. So we just kind of were talking about that before. But, just in terms of you, so maybe even before music, what is your upbringing and what is your kind of story from the beginning?
Yeah, so I grew up in Gore, 2 hours from here. And there is like a part of me that is before music, but it's not a very long time.
Yeah.
My first sort of memories that I can really remember were when I was 5, my dad recorded an album. And I mean, there's obviously other things before then in my brain, but that memory is quite vivid, and I can remember just watching the band and at the time I didn't sit there and think, that's what I want to do. But I think when I look back now, obviously those things have a big impact on you when you're young. So I was like, from 5 years old, I was like, that's a normal thing to do. That's a cool thing to do. And obviously I still think Dad's pretty cool. So at the time I was like, that seems fun. And so, yeah, music has always been part of my growing up process, and always sung with Dad, and then my younger sisters and I sung together and have been singing together a lot lately. So yeah, it really is like from the get-go it was a big part of me. But yeah, grew up in Gore, which is a little town of about 8,000. Yep. And yeah, it's a great place. It was an awesome place to grow up, and I'm glad I did. Yeah,
so for the people listening who don't know what Gore is, you'll also hear that there's a slight little something going on with the R's that she's saying. So like, it's not that they're rolled with like when we think about R, it's more like the going on with your R's. So if you hear that is why a lot of people. So I didn't know that until I came down to Dunedin. I've never heard it before.
Yeah,
and then these people. So anyway, so you're talking about being socialized and seeing what's around you, and that does kind of become the norm. And you kind of don't second guess a lot of the things that are happening. But with your kind of progression into like getting into music yourself, did you just have like a couple of influences outside of your family where you're just like, that would be cool to be like that? Or was it just that it was like within your family?
I think when you said that, there's one name that comes to mind, and she's Canadian, but she's actually based in New Zealand. She's a New Zealander. And her name's Tammy Nielsen, and she was someone who, in Gore, they have the New Zealand Country Music Awards where they present like the TUI, the New Zealand Music Award for country music. And she came down, and I think that was probably the first time, like, it sounds really weird, but she had like long dark hair. Yep. And so the weird things like that when you're young, your brain's like, oh, maybe that's something I could do. And And I remember she had a, like she played guitar, and that was sort of what I envisioned myself looking like if I was a musician. And so, watching her she's probably one of the biggest influences in my life. And I've had some great times with her, and she's someone that now, if I don't know what to do, I call her and say, what do I do? I definitely say she would be someone that really influenced me. And then I listened to a lot of American country music, as everybody kind of did, I think, whereas now there's a lot more Australian country music and New Zealand country music happening. But when I was growing up, it was just like the Chicks or the Dixie Chicks.
Yep.
And people like that definitely... Yeah, a lot of female country artists. Sure. And then Dad listened to a lot of, male country artists, a lot of like traditional, country lads. So kind of a blend of those two things is, I think, what inspired those early years. Right,
so the genre was kind of something that you grew into. It wasn't one of those things that you went seeking. It was just always around you?
Yeah, like I didn't listen to, and still, I mean, I'm a little bit more diverse now, but for a long time, I was so outside of what was on radio, or still, like I'm definitely not hip when it comes to new music and stuff. But then I'm like, a cult follower of some kinds of folk and country music. So, it was just like what played at home. And that was, I always used to take like CDs of the Chicks and people like that to school, like in my Walkman. And everyone was like, what is this? And I was like, it's cool, guys. So, definitely wasn't really a question. It was just something that I was around, and also something that I was just always really drawn to. So
I think there's a purity to like listening to things that aren't necessarily mainstream, or like what would be considered mainstream, because you kind of just do what you think sounds good to you. And I feel like a lot of the people who make music that kind of goes against, or not against, but isn't necessarily falling in line with all of that stuff, a lot of it's because of passion and because you like the sound of that. Like, have you found that that's why you enjoy making this sort of music as well?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people listen to very different music to what they make. And like my music doesn't necessarily sound, like Dolly Parton or like the Chicks. Yeah. But I think it's the writing side of things that really is, like, that's really what inspires me. I love certain sounds and certain feels in music, but when I think about my favourite songs, or songs that I always go back to, it's always songs that the words like make me cry. Like that's my thing. Which is everyone's thing, and so so I think it's the lyrical content, I guess, that has always attracted me to particular artists. Like there's lots of artists in the country music genre that I just don't really connect with. So I think bottom line is it's like lyrical, and I think that definitely influences how I write my stuff.
And then in terms, so we'll get into the writing then. So when did you kind of shift from just, because I'm guessing you would have just like played music and played songs that you knew, to when did you start thinking, I want to start writing music and I want to start, putting songs together?
Yeah, so I definitely did sing other people's songs for a long time, and for a long time didn't even consider that there was another option. Yeah. And something about the country music, I guess, world here is that there's lots of competitions around, and like in Gore, we have the New Zealand Gold Guitar Awards, which is kind of like the big one of, and there's lots of people like travel around all the time to these competitions, and they were so important in forming who I am as an artist, and like doing that every year and practicing for it every year made me, one, have goals to work towards, and also just made me feel comfortable on stage and things like that. But one, I guess, negative, it depends how you look at it, but one side of it is that those competitions, typically it is like classic country songs were sung, and it wasn't common to have someone sing their own songs. Right. And so I wasn't actually surrounded with a lot of original music when I was, especially when I was young. Like it wasn't really, it's like everyone wants to hear the old favourites, and I want to hear the old favourites too. So it's, I get it, but I think that that's maybe why it took me a long time to think that maybe writing was something that I wanted to do.
Sure, yeah.
And then I was lucky enough, my mum's parents were from Ireland, and they came to Gore in the 50s, and their whole family is still over in Ireland, and there's many of them. And I sort of grew up like learning about them, and I knew all their names and could like pick them out in photographs when I was like 8.
Yeah.
But I never met them. And then I went over there with my mum when I was 11. And then I remember like the days coming up to leaving, and I've got Dad's family's here, but I went over there and there was people there that had curly hair like me.
Right.
And I had this really strange experience. Like as an 11-year-old, I was just like so overwhelmed by people that had mannerisms like my nana or my mum and all this stuff. And so I felt very connected and still do feel very connected to Ireland. And so that was where I wrote my first song, and it was pretty bad, but it was sad because I was leaving these people, and I sung it for them like the day before I left, and it was this big dramatic thing. And, but it was so, like cathartic, like it was very therapeutic, and from then on it's just been my therapy since then.
So how old do you think you would have been around that time?
11.
About 11 years old. And that's with the music as well, or just the lyrics? Or
no, it was the whole shebang.
Damn.
I really wouldn't play it now, but it was a full song.
Wow. And from there, so probably like you getting serious into it, how long do you think that would have been from you playing overall, that was, you know, your first song after starting? Does that make sense? So like if you started, and then how many years had it been until you wrote your first song, which is that one?
I don't know. So you mean from that 11-year-old song to the next song?
No, sorry, from you starting with music to then. Yeah,
well, I literally started singing with Dad on stage when I was 4 years old.
Yeah.
And so I don't know, 3 or 4, I guess, is when I started singing. And so it took me a while to, but I think a lot of people, you know, like we were talking about before, it was sort of my first experience of heartbreak. And often it's that emotion that makes people start writing or start painting or start whatever.
Yeah, for sure.
And so I think that was probably why that happened at that time as well.
And when you were writing it and when you were going through everything, like, is it one of those things that in your lyrics to other people will be words, but to you could like feel, smell, do, like all of your different senses come to it? Yeah,
definitely. And even the fact that I wrote that song, and I have lots of songs like this, that if I wrote it at the time, which is my favourite time to do it, is really in the moment. And I write a lot of reflective songs as well, but there's a few that are like another one that was also written about that, about Ireland and my family, was written a few years ago when I went back as an 18-year-old, which was sort of even more magical of an experience, I guess. And I was surrounded by a lot of Celtic music as well, and could go to a pub, which I couldn't do when I was living in. So I was so inspired at that time, and I wrote this song in this like grotty Dublin backpacker room. And when I play it, I really can like feel being there again and all that kind of thing. So that's kind of a special weird thing that happens with songwriting.
Right. And in the writing process for you, so when you are writing things like just like that, you can remember the location, you can remember everything that was going on around you, so that it's one of those things where if you were to go back to it, replay it, or whatever it is with it, it takes you back to a certain time. And that's what I've always loved about music, is that it's a time capsule at sometimes. And it's like, might be when you listen to a song, who you were listening to it with, where it was played for you. And you can like, all of those things come back so quickly, but you as the actual artist get to create those moments for yourself. And so that's pretty cool that you like being there in the moment when you're feeling something. Was that a skill that over time you've found is a lot of like release for you, and say you're feeling a lot of just intense emotion, whether it be happy, whether it be sad, angry, that your writing's now kind of part of your release?
Yeah, and I think I even, like when things happen that are a big deal or feel like a big deal at the time, there's kind of like a number of songs that will come out of an event, you know, because I guess it literally is, it's therapy, because at the time, like I might be writing something that's like annoyed or angry or upset or whatever, and then often I will write like an almost okay with things song, and then I'll write like a reflective kind of thing. So, and usually all of the chapters won't be played in public, but you know, so definitely it's a release, and I always feel much better after I've written it. And sometimes you gotta have unfortunate situations to write good songs.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
because like those things where you can probably feel like someone's feeling something, everyone connects with it a little bit more, right? Because you can see that It's either something that I can relate to because I've been through what your lyrics are saying, or I can tell what you're feeling and I felt that feeling before, but I've never known how to express it. And I think if people can get into something like that, whether it be talking, whether it be being able to write a song, if you're skilled enough, like it's just so good for a lot of people. And I had a question on that. So if you're getting, because some of that stuff is quite sensitive to yourself, but some of the best stuff comes out of you just being as honest as possible. Have there been songs that you've just never wanted to release because of the content of it, even though you're like such a big fan of that song?
I don't think so. I definitely agree that it's the honest, really deep stuff that is always, and it always is those songs that when I play them, they are the ones that connect with people.
Yeah.
And I think particularly because of the way that I perform and the places I perform, like the shows are often really intimate. And so sometimes when I'm playing, I'm like, oh, why do I do this to myself? Because I really do, I guess, relive, when I'm singing these songs. And if I'm not, then I don't think I'm doing a good job, because I think that's literally my purpose, is to tell a story and not just to stand there and like make noise with, it's like, I should be feeling it. Yeah. And if I'm not, then I'm obviously like tired or something. So, so that can be quite draining. And sometimes I think, man, I wish I could just write like fun songs and not go through this. But also, like I said before, that my favorite songs and the ones that I always gravitate back to eventually are like often, I mean, not sad, not always like heartbreaky songs, but songs that are really honest. And so, I kind of am drawn to, I don't know, feeling really deeply, I guess. Yeah. And I think a lot of people like that. Like a lot of people prefer the sad songs to the boppy ones. And there's a time and a place for both. But yeah, I think, yes, I do sometimes regret it, but it's all part of it for me. And
100%. And you're coming back to the storytelling. Now, something that I've noticed over time, so I'm very big into hip hop, and that's always been my thing, but it's gone from storytelling in the entire album, or like looking at an entire concept, to singles now. And I think music in general has kind of done that, because we have like the likes of your TikToks, your Spotifys, where people are just playing one song instead of whole albums now. So you were talking about the CD and the like Discman, and that's like you're going through, and there's like the physical something, opening the CD case, reading everything in it, and like that was part of the experience, and we don't have that anymore. When you come to writing, do you ever think of like an entire catalogue of what you're
100%.
trying to? Yeah.
So yes, it is gone in a sense. However, I think that, when someone that I love, like an artist I really love, releases an album, I will always listen to it from start to finish. Yeah. And I will always listen to it. Like, I have a real thing against shuffling albums. Like, I hate the shuffle button. Yeah. Because when, like, my record Wildfires, when I released it, that track listing took me so long. Right. And it's actually in chronological order. Like, literally, that album it's like almost like a concept album, I guess, that it's a 1 to 12 is a chronological story of my life for a few years. So I do think that in general, and often how we discover music, like on playlists or whatever, that the album often isn't a thing anymore. But I guess I'm lucky in the sense that a lot of people still buy my music physically. So I still sell vinyl and I still sell CD. So I hope that there are people, I think there are people too that just buy because they want to support musicians and they put them in their collection and don't actually listen. But the answer is that I definitely think that there is still a lot of value in having a piece of work like that. And I hope that, I don't think it's going to go away. I think even though singles are a big thing, I think that they will always be part of a collection of something. So.
Yeah. And I think you get the full appreciation when you hear a single wedged in between where it is. And you're just like, oh, that's when it hits in. And like when you can see, like you were talking about, like a chronological order of a story going through, and then you play it through the whole time, you just have a brand new appreciation, and you can listen to it multiple times and get a different feel each time. Yeah, I don't know. I'm very, very big into that, and that's why I'm the same. I don't like the shuffle button, and I like, if there is an intro, if it says intro, interlude, and like outro, that you have to go through it all. You can't just play the songs. Cool. So part of your journey, you got to, so you're obviously writing music, but then you're obviously, so you want to get that out there, right? So you want to showcase it to everyone, and there's a little show in New Zealand where we showcase someone having talent.
Yes.
Also known as New Zealand's Got Talent. And you went on there, and so if you want to go check this out, it's just type Jenny Mitchell in on Google. You'll see a whole heap of stuff. She has a website. She's also on YouTube with everything, interviews, etc. But this is where you I guess, would this be for you some of the first times that you actually got, not mainstream, but on a platform where people outside of your circle could start to see you?
Yeah. And as a 14-year-old, it was a bizarre experience.
Yeah.
And I'm actually in a lot of ways really glad that it happened when I was 14, because I think if it happened now, or even if it had happened a couple of years ago, I would have been really stressed about, I don't know, I think I just would have overthought things, whereas, I mean, there were still things that I really had to, I guess, like push for, because it's interesting. Everyone knows the bad stories about those shows, and I actually didn't have a bad experience, but it was the first time when, you know, like I'd never had a stylist and things like that. And so I had the stylist, and she was so lovely. She was such an amazing person, and we got along really well. But she, you know, like was like, well, I think this is a good option for you to wear. And I knew straight away. And at the time in my head, I was thinking, imagine what my friends in Gore are going to say, like imagine what they're going to say at school. And obviously, because that's your whole world, and that's the most important thing. But when I look back now, actually, I still am a bit pedantic about wearing certain things on stage. And so really, I didn't know it, but I was sort of like branding myself almost. And I didn't even really know what my style was, or I didn't know what my brand was, but I knew what it wasn't. And so with clothes, that was the one thing. And then the other side of it was that I didn't necessarily have like a sad story, right?
Yeah, right.
And my storyline really on the show was my dad, which he was just there because he would be there anyway. But they sort of loved that whole thing that he was like a singer, and then and it was nice because it actually was, that's a real authentic thing. So I was happy about it. But things like that they really wanted to portray me as kind of like this country gal.
Yeah.
And I am, like, I live in the country and I live in a small rural town, but I don't necessarily that they wanted me to sing Dolly Parton songs. And I love Dolly Parton songs, but I didn't sing them. I was like, well, I don't want to do that because that's not my thing. And so, bizarre experience, but probably one of the most, like, it was a real turning point, I think, a pivotal moment or whatever. And I learned lots about what I didn't want to do and how to, you know, have those conversations. Even now, if I was in that position, I would find it hard to say, I don't want to sing that song. And those, I guess, commercial, you know, reality TV shows, they can literally say, well, she's not playing the game, so she can go. Thankfully, that didn't happen, and they eventually did get on board, and it was a really great opportunity to play some of my own music to definitely the biggest audience that I'd ever. Just a good, even like nerves training thing. I always post New Zealand's Got Talent. I always used to think nothing is as bad as that, because like after you perform, even if you have a great performance, and I was lucky nothing went really wrong for me, no major problems for me, and I'd sing my song and I'd feel great and it was awesome, and then I was like, oh my God, like what are the judges going to say? And then you're standing there and then there's this live audience, and it's the most pressure cooked situation I think I've ever been in. And again, I'm glad that I did it when I was 14 and not now, because I'd probably just combust if it was now. And I remember just being actually quite in the moment, and when I was performing, I wasn't worrying about what was going to happen afterwards, which I think is something that happens. It's a lovely time when you're young and that happens, or younger, whereas now I probably am a bit more overthinking and whatever. So really interesting learning curve and great platform for the following years, I guess.
So, I mean, a couple of things that you touched on, and I think it's quite important when people are trying to do what you're doing or trying to be creative of some sort, not giving in to what other people's ideas of creativity is. So you played your own originals, even though you said that like the types of things they were trying to get you to play is to portray the character that they were trying to make you be, but you just wanted to be Jenny, your own self, and you got to bargain with them a little bit, right? And that's helping you with where you are now. So you got third, you finished third.
Yes, yeah.
How good is that?
Yeah, it is pretty cool. I don't know. At the time, I just don't think I was really thinking about what was going on. Yeah. Like it was really exciting, but when I look back now, I'm like, oh, that was cool. And there's nothing really that I don't think a lot of people could say this that have been on those shows, but when I look at it, there's not really a lot that there's a few cringy moments, but there's not a lot that I hate or that I really wish didn't exist. And I think, especially when you're so young, I think a lot of people do perhaps get persuaded to do things. And so, I'm just really happy that, Dad kept things the right way.
Yeah. And if you were your age, now, you're your age then, but you were in a time now where social media is way more amped up and people are just so much more really assholey, that's all I'll say. Do you think it would be as fun?
I don't know. I think in some ways maybe there would have been more traction from it.
Yeah.
I think I see a lot of people Australia's, I guess it's a bigger show anyway, but a lot of people, they really harness that moment and then they have a fan base that they don't lose, whereas I'm sure there's lots and lots of people that maybe watched me and thought it was cool, but didn't ever actually find me or connect with me. But we did really funny things. My mum is amazing and she is a real opportunist. Yep. And she was like, well, I think what we're going to do is do a tour of schools. And I was like, what? And so it was Sunday night it would air, and then you had, I think it was until midday the next day, I'm pretty sure, that the voting.
To do your voting, yeah.
Well, it might have been that night or midnight or something. Anyway, so each week my mum had planned out these schools in Southland that we were going to go to. And I would go to these schools like a show pony. It's so embarrassing when I think about it, but go to these schools and I'd be like, hi everyone, I'm Jenny, and play high schools and everything. Anyway, so I'd play a song and I'd say that I was from Gore and I was from St. Peter's College and please vote for me. And I had friends that were wearing Vote for Jenny t-shirts. And, there was some shops in Gore, some local shops that are really, everyone in Gore's awesome, but some really lovely people, and they had shop windows dedicated to Vote for Jenny stuff, and there was posters everywhere, the council was on board, it was so bizarre. And and me and Dad were kind of living this really strange existence for that 6-week period, because he at the time was a mailman, which is quite an important job. You need to be delivering the mail on the right day. And so he had this delivery driver backup that, because we didn't know until midnight before we flew up whether we were going or not. And so he would call up and the delivery driver and be like, well, we've got to go, but sort of wasn't allowed to tell anyone because it was all all confidential. And so it was just really, it was fun. It was really fun, and just getting on a plane and doing all that stuff was really cool. So it was a fun time.
Yeah, that's cool. So you're putting yourself out there, and so what I like to talk to people about in terms of their creativity and in terms of maybe even in academia is when they start to see their own flavor come into what they're doing. So when they're researching, this is their brand of research, and when they're making music, this is their sound, and that's kind of not distinct of you and not what everyone should be expecting, but that's when you feel like you're in the zone as creating this sort of thing. Was there ever a distinct moment or time period where you started to feel like you were coming into your own?
Yeah, I think so. I recorded after New Zealand's Got Talent. We were sort of felt that it was a good idea to record something, and so I actually recorded at Albany Street Studios just down the road with John Enos, who is a professor here, and we recorded basically with a bunch of Dad's old muso friends. Yep. And we recorded this album, and it was really fun. And I'm actually so thankful that I had that experience. I was 15 then, so I was still really young, didn't know how the recording process worked, and I didn't really know how to communicate my ideas, I don't think. And I'm still really proud of that album, and it's kind of a beautiful little time capsule to look back on for me now, because I'm like, oh, it's so funny. And even my voice just sounds so young when I listen to it. But throughout that time, I learned a lot about what my sound wasn't. That was something that, and it's it was actually quite an awful feeling, because in the end it was all fine, but during the process I was like, I know that's not right. But I was so scared, because you're working with these guys who were all I don't know, 50,
Yeah.
I guess.
They've been in the game a while.
Yeah, and they're all still great friends of mine, and I respect them so much as musicians and creators. But you know, when they're like, this is a good idea, it was so hard for me to say, I don't know. And the bottom line is, I think if you're the songwriter and you want to be part of that process, some people are happy to give it to a producer and say, you do it. I don't think I'm ever going to be one of those people, but that even, it doesn't matter how many years of experience you've had or whatever, if it's not right and it's your work, you know, like, and I just wish that I had probably exercised that a little bit more. But in saying that, I just learned so much about being in a band and communicating, and even just how to sing in studio. I found that really hard, and it's very different to singing on a stage. And so that was a really like hectic time. And then I went to record my second record in end of first year, so end of 2017. And I worked with my current producer, Matt Fell, who's in Sydney, and worked with amazing musicians again. I've been really lucky with my teams, and there was like, I would just cry because I was so happy. And I just still work with Matt for that exact reason, that he, you know, we're just on the same wavelength, and it's really hard to find that person sometimes. But I think that is the key, is finding like the team that understands. And I would almost not even have to say anything, and I'd be like, oh, a little bit more floaty or something. And I don't know a lot of the music terminology. I'm not really good at music theory at all. And so I've always been a bit self-conscious about that, because I'm like, oh, what do I know? Like, and so anyway, with Matt, I think working on that record and hearing that record finished, I just didn't want to change anything. And I still really feel like that is the truest and best representation of my sound and my thing. Yeah,
I think that's when I started getting into it. That one was unreal. That was really, really good. And so, I mean, there are so many cool things to come out of that, and the one is taking creative control. Also finding, I've said this so many times, but finding people who just gel with you and don't, like, no one wants to be in charge. We just all want to create something good. And in those moments when you don't have to speak, you know, like floaty is a word that you can do, and everyone else is like, I can do that. And when you're in that, it's like a proper flow state where you're not having to keep going back and back and back, and then you start resenting the process. You're actually loving the process more. When you were in there though, so you had that, I mean, it's a really cool thing to talk about, because people would just be like, oh, she makes music. How can she be mad at all that sort of stuff? But like, you know, you didn't study music. No, you didn't come here and do any music at all.
No.
Yeah. So you're just a musician by trade because you love it.
Yep.
You didn't study it formally, and then you're going in to talk to people who this is like their life, where they can like all the notes, all that sort of stuff, but you're just what you like to listen to and what you like hearing and what you feel good about, which I think is beautiful, because you're actually doing things that make you happy. How did you get over that fact that, you know, you're just, you play music because you love music, but you like, even though you had that little voice in the back of your head that was like, you don't know music. How did you get through that?
I think I was just really fortunate that instead of, you know, I talk to a lot of people that really feel like they don't have any control when they're in the producing stage. And I had sort of, when I started talking to Matt, I sent him an email one day and said that I really wanted to do this, and these were my influences, and that I did want to be really involved. And so I think the most important thing for people that are doing it for the first time, or even, you know, like the third or fourth time and they haven't been happy, is just being really upfront with the people you're working with. Because I just know so many people that are like, oh, it's not my thing, I just like to write the words, and then we just work together and they just do it and it's cool. And I just know that that's not really the path that I want to go down. And so I think it was just me being from the start really upfront. And so as a result of that, Matt would always just be, you know, I never had to say awkwardly, like put my hand up and say, hey guys. They would always just say like, what do you think? Like, or they would always say like, does that vibe with you? And I'd be like, yeah. So I think it's just having, open communication and knowing, me saying like, I really want this to be a collaborative thing. And so they were just all on board with it. And it was just that give and take and chatting. And you're not always going to agree either, you know, like I don't even want to be the boss of that situation either, because Matt is he made songs sound, like there was a couple of songs that I never would have even imagined the way that they turned out. And yet they feel, like I said, like the truest version of me. So it's, I think that if you find a person like that, like Matt, then you should not stop working with them because, I just don't think it happens all the time anyway.
And that's so transferable against like everything in life, right?
Yeah.
You just have to have good communications, be with someone you trust and be with someone that you know is trying to, like you're both collaboratively trying to get better at something. So you said that he's in Australia?
Yeah.
Still in Australia?
Yeah.
So how does recording work now?
Yeah, so this is was really testing how I felt about the relationship because like you say, it's all about trust, and I felt really great being in the studio and being there, but I actually love the recording process. I think it's a great thing to be part of, and I love being there when the band's there, and it's just, it happens so, in terms of your year or your couple of year album cycle, it's like, it's a week of special time, and I've always been, I don't know, I just always want those times to be really fun and something to look back on. So this year I was planning to do lots of recording and do lots of things, and we have actually recorded a couple of songs that are sort of almost finished, and we Zoomed and had a chats, and our collaboration has happened that way. And I was so pessimistic going into the process. I thought, this is not going to work, I'm not going to feel the same. And it's actually been, I don't know whether I like one or the other better, but it's been awesome, and I get these mixes back and he's put this, violin or whatever on, and I just love it. And I cry in the studio when I like something, and then I still cry here. So, and it's quite exciting, like when he sends me an email and it's like mix number 19 or whatever, I can't do anything else. Like I'm so excited about it that I just am not productive in any other way until I listen to it. And so, and I'm still working with the same musicians, and we still, when they put a track on, I call them or whatever and we chat, and so I still feel really connected to it. So I've had a much more positive remote recording experience than I expected.
But it's probably because you built up that trust prior, right?
Yes.
Like because you've gone through all that, so now you still know, like you can vibe off each other, and you can just listen to it and you'd be like, she'd vibe this. And then you'd be like, he's doing what I thought he would do.
Yeah.
And then you can, it's just very small cues that you can give each other.
Definitely.
Which is like that's the definition of trust, right? It's like being able to just give everything to someone for them to be able to do the best that they can with it. That's so cool. So when going through the listening process, where do you have to be? What's the sort of zone you have to be in? Do you check your headphones on? Do you like to be by yourself? Do you like to listen to it with like the people you're working here with? What's your kind of ideal situation?
I mean, when I do get it, like I said, I want to listen to it right then. So it's sort of is a bit random, but my favourite place always to listen to anything, but definitely listen to mixes of my music is in the car. I just love driving and listening that way. I'm not sure why, but and if not, then I will put headphones on. I hate like listening out of a phone or So definitely headphones, but if I could pick the moment, I would be in the car and just being able to fully take it in and not need to be anywhere
Wow, that's so cool. I mean, I don't like to toot my own horn as well, but sometimes I listen to my own podcast. Sometimes I do listen back to them.
Well, you should. They're cool.
And we just like go through them, but like it's more so that I can listen to things that I missed out on, or like so I want to make that better, and rather than because there are people who have caught me out. They said, you listen to, and I'm like, no. I'm critiquing, okay? This is part of the feedback so that I can say, next time we should do this, next time we should do that. And I'm guessing you're the same. I mean, you're going to appreciate your own art as well, right?
But I think it's definitely the same thing. I'm definitely not listening to me because I feel like having a jam to me.
Yeah, right.
And especially in that back and forth process, because it's listening to, I might suggest that there's less violin at 3 minutes and 2 seconds. So often it's it's quite hard to listen to songs with fresh ears, like I would call them. And so sometimes I have to take a couple of days off a song and then come back to it.
Sure.
Because you sort of get, in studio particularly, you get studio fatigue and you just don't even know what reality is anymore, and you just listen to the same stuff so many times and the same line. Like if I'm trying to sing a line and I can't quite get it right, you've listened to it 36 times and you're just
yeah.
losing your mind. So, listener fatigue is a real thing. So, yeah, it's a cool process. But yeah, during that back and forth time, I do definitely listen, and it is to critique. It's like to make things better.
Yeah, and growing up and, you know, being in something where you're giving, so by the sounds of things, when you write, when you record, when you do everything, you're putting you into it, which is why I probably like it so much, is because I feel like I got to know you when listening to your music. And when you're going through that process, like, it's hard to give everything, but then someone else give you feedback sometimes. Like, sometimes it's really hard to be like, I've put everything out there and then you're giving me this critique. Like, detaching yourself from the music at some point is really, really hard. Was it hard for you to go through that process, or did you kind of pick it up quite early?
I think both. I think that I definitely struggle because I don't have a lot of differentiation between music me and me at all.
Yeah.
Which is maybe problematic, but I really do, in all aspects of my music, my merch and my live show and my recorded stuff is all an extension of me.
Yeah.
And so I definitely, of course, if someone, you know, says something about it, then I don't love that. But also there's been, you know, with Matt, for example, he's someone that I really respect. And there's also a number of people, one of my great friends, Mike, he lives up the road in Meraki, and I sent him pretty much every song I ever write and say, what do you think about this? And he will always say, he won't say, this is terrible, don't ever play it, but he might say that, you know, this is special, or he might just say, yeah, it's cool. And so that's sort of, I know that's not connecting, and I'm not always going to listen, but there's definitely a group of people that I trust and respect and want opinions from. I think that's the difference, is if someone is offering their opinion and you really don't want it, then that's not a good feeling. But if someone that I respect says, I'm not really sure if this is you. I remember my sister once said to me, I really like all your other songs. And I thought, here's a compliment sandwich. But this one just doesn't feel like you at all.
Yeah.
And which is a very insightful thing for a small human to say. And I thought, actually, at this moment, I was like, what the hell? Like, what'd you say, Megan? But then afterwards, I played it once at a show and I'll never play it again. I just thought, you are so right. That did not feel good, and I don't know what was going on. And so, I think that everyone needs critique from other people, and I am probably my harshest critic, I think, but also just having a fresh perspective, and I think it's a really important part of
and people who know you and people who want you to do well as well. They're the ones giving you this because they love you and they don't want you to put out anything that you won't be proud of. Yeah, that's for sure. And now you brought up some Little Human that you were talking about, and you were also talking about, you know, getting the tour ready and all that sort of stuff, which is why we delayed this, because I wanted you on a little earlier, but then I was like, no, I want to hear about how that all goes. So how did that all come about? Because that was like, I mean, with COVID and everything going on, like, can you go to different places? Where can you travel to? How many people can be in there? How close are we? And then it ended up being quite like a really cool, cozy looking thing. How did that come about? And was that always part of the plan, or how did it have to change because of COVID?
Definitely not part of the plan, though I'm very grateful that it happened. If I think back to January and how I thought that my year was going to go, I had back of my mind plans to be in Canada. Nothing was really it's set in stone, but that was sort of by about now, that's where I thought I would be touring and travelling. And had sort of been working on that for years. But there were some things in March, April, I for the first time was billed for the National Folk Festival in Australia, which was been something that I've dreamed about for a long time, and something that people who have worked for a lot longer than I have dreamed about for a long time. And so definitely went through a bit of a grieving process in the first half of the year. And, those opportunities may come back in different ways, but at the time it was really heartbreaking. And I remember just thinking, am I ever going to tour again? Is that just done? Is that not a thing anymore? But thank goodness it is. So I sort of I spent a few months being quite confused and didn't really know. I mean, still now, well, we're pretty good now, but say 2 months ago, it was still a bit iffy.
Absolutely.
Yeah, to book tours and things because you're paying to promote them and market them and spending a lot of time as well booking them. And I just felt quite scared and I didn't want to. There was also a whole thing going on that I felt, if something had happened at a show, if there had been like, God, I was just imagining like a Jenny Mitchell cluster. So that was a real thing for me. I was thinking, why am I doing this? Is it only for income? Because income's really important. And it was like when we couldn't tour for a couple of months, it was pretty important that we needed to get something happening. But I just really had to think about, there was one show in particular that was sort of on the cusp and I just really had to think about why I was doing it and if it needed to be then, and was I only doing it because I was personally upset that I hadn't played a show, or was I doing it because I really wanted to play the show for the people? And the answer was the former, and so I postponed the show.
Wow.
And I felt it's just one show and it sounds really dramatic, but at the time I just really felt like I had sort of let people down because I always... it's a big deal to get out of your house and off your couch and pay your $20. I really think that I really respect that process and I don't want to be flaky or... But of course, people were really understanding, and I got all these lovely emails. I sent an email out to the ticket holders and said, I'm so sorry, and poured my heart out. And I got the nicest responses, and everyone was like, it's absolutely fine. But when your job is to gather people in small spaces, it's particularly difficult in the pandemic. And so that happened, and then it was probably a month after that I started booking. I felt a bit better and started booking the tour with the girls. And we created the Grain Store Sessions, which I've been talking about, which is a little live EP, and Dad's actually on it as well. Yeah. And we recorded it just up the road at Oamaru in the Grain Store Gallery, which is a beautiful art gallery up there. And I played a couple of gigs there. Donna Demente, the artist, hosts gigs a lot, and they're really great. And I always thought when I went in there, as you'll see in the video, there's a lot going on, and it's basically her life's work. And I find it a very inspiring spot, and it's got great acoustics. And I always thought that I'd love to either write there have a week there and write, or record something in the space. And so when we couldn't go anywhere and couldn't really do anything, it sort of came up that it might be a good idea to do one of those things. And so I asked my sisters if they would be interested, and we've always sung together, but we've never really worked on a project like that. And the same, we've never really put together a tour, like a show for a tour. So yeah, it's been an amazing fun, also good for me to learn that I'm not always in charge of everything.
All right.
And I think because I often tour by myself and it's usually just me, I'm so used to calling all the shots because I have to, because there's no one else there to do it. And I need to know where everything is at all times. That it was just learning, okay, Nicola can do this job. She's not also, so my sisters are twins and they're 16, but in my brain they're still 5 years old.
Of course, yeah.
And so for me, I was like, they can't do anything. Just sit down. Just learning that was really cool. And I think probably a good learning curve for, future touring with bands and things. It'll be good for me. But super fun. And it was a real treat actually to be not on my own the whole time. And certainly never felt lonely because it was always loud. Yeah. It was cool.
No, that's cool. And it's also cool to have the harmonies and everything going on and you're all working together. Because, like I said, the live one, when you're listening to it, it just doesn't sound like, it sounds like you've gone into a studio and you've layered over yourself and stuff. Everything just works so well together. And part of the traveling, the venues that you were at, they were really cool. It just seemed like we were all just chilling out and I'm going to play you a few jams. We love it. And then we're all just in this together. And you talked about the intimacy of a lot of the venues that you like to go to and the kind of setting you like to set up. With that and everyone, because it would have been smaller numbers than usual, how did you find that? So there's one fear that I have, which is putting everything into everything and people not showing up. But I think you did extremely well. Did you ever have that before you even went on? Before you started everything or before you had to go out and play your first song, was that ever in the back of your mind?
I think that will always be, for any musician, it's a real fear.
Yeah.
And I think it's when it does work, it's the most beautiful thing, because you know, booking a tour, if you're booking it yourself, which I do, is so solo and isolating. You're literally just behind a computer for months and months and trying to make things work and calling people and asking favors and planning accommodation and all these things. And then when you finally do get to this place that it was once just on a spreadsheet and it's a real place and there's real people there, it's just such a relief. That's my favorite part of the whole thing, is the little 2% of that part. So definitely it is a fear. And like I said before, I think it's about the fact that I know it's a big deal to leave your house, you know, and a lot of people don't buy tickets in advance unless it's like Elton John. So that's a big thing that plays into that fear. And I always, about a week out, think, what have I done? This is a terrible idea. But usually, it's those last couple of days, and sometimes even just at the door. I know now in my sort of circuit of New Zealand venues that there are some places that 90% will buy at the door on the night, and you just have to trust that those people are going to come. And it's also interesting at the moment, we were really fortunate on our tour. I think we got in just before it happened, but it's awesome that there's so many bands touring at the moment. And it's so great because people are really excited to be out and they're happy. I mean, a lot of people were always happy to pay for music, but I think there's a real post-lockdown appreciation. But that does mean that it's quite a competitive space as well. So I'm glad that we toured when we did and not right now, because there's, I mean, for me, I'm like, I could be at 3 gigs in a night. There's so many things going on. So yes, the answer is that it is always a bit scary. But we've just, I guess, been fortunate that we've always had pretty good support.
Ooh, well, you're a small business if you think about it. Like you are running yourself, because I know sometimes you get like maybe an artist will pull out and you'll get an email and it will be signed by that artist, but you know for damn sure like it's the agent or whoever it was that was doing all their booking for them. But people are getting a Jenny Mitchell email from you. And we were just talking about the merch before, so I've like kept up with most of it, and it's been pretty cool. So I just wanted to know about the actual, so you had like a journal type diary thing. What was the idea behind that? Because it was weird. It came up at a time where journaling for me became a very integral part of my day, because I had so much going on in my head all the time, and I just never got my thoughts out, and there were so many things that would just keep me up. And then until I started doing that, and then at the same time I saw that like you were working with Ashton to like get some cool stuff out. What was your idea behind all of that?
So I also love journaling, and particularly in lockdown found it really, really useful. But initially the whole idea was that it was going to be a songwriting book, because I teach songwriting in high schools throughout the year, and they all do it and it's fine. But I remember the first time I saw that someone was writing a song on like a Word document, and I was like, what? Because I'm such a, I don't know, I love notebooks, and I've always written my songs in notebooks. Like even now I would never, like, I just don't write on my computer. And so I always have had these stacks and stacks of notebooks, and I love looking back through them. And so I don't know, felt like a really old woman when I was in this classroom, like, what do you mean? And so that was where the first idea came from. And I've always wanted to make merch that, I mean, I love a good t-shirt, and I actually have so many bands t-shirts. But I've always wanted to kind of come up with things that are quite practical and not just throw away, random stuff. And so to me, because I am a notebook enthusiast, that felt like a really a valuable thing that I would want to buy if if it was on someone else's merch table. So and then it sort of morphed into, it's called the Traveller's Notebook, and it has some lyrics from my song Travelling Bones on it. And so then I thought, well, actually it could also be like a travel journal or whatever. And it's been a really cool experience hearing about what people use them for. And one woman told me that she puts all the recipes in them and stuff. So that was a cool process, and all that part of the small business I actually really love. I love coming up with concepts and then seeing them, real
Yeah.
real things. And I've been really happy with how people have responded to it. So
Yeah. So that's your like music side and all that, but then you also studied comms and marketing.
yeah.
Has that come in at all? Like, have you been able to use some of the stuff that you've been doing in your courses to help with like this side of everything?
Yeah, definitely. I think so long as I am doing all my own publicity here, I'm just me at the moment. I write all my own press releases and things like that, and so those skills are actually invaluable. And before I did that at uni, I didn't really know what I was doing. Like, I was kind of just writing and thinking, oh yeah, that sounds okay. And I've always really liked writing, so it didn't feel really foreign. But actually, to have a method and know how to do things, that is really useful, and certainly makes it less stressful because I know sort of what I'm doing. I like to think I do. And so I definitely think it has come, in handy. And in the marketing side of things, like digital marketing is unfortunately a big part of it, because that's how I think my stance has changed a lot. I used to be quite anti social media for music in a way, because I don't really love being ultra salesy about my stuff. But I have realised through lockdown and through COVID, when we couldn't connect with people in person, that it actually is a valuable transaction.
Sure.
It's made me be not so scared of it, or not so worried that I'm going to look lame, because I love watching other people's behind the scenes stuff or whatever daily things that they're doing, especially musicians. Like, my newsfeed is basically all musicians in their life. So I've just realised that it's okay to share, to share things and to share your merch, and that people actually, if there's people that I love, artists that I love that share a new merch item, I'm so excited because I just want to buy it. So, that's been a cool learning journey of this year, but also definitely through uni, I learnt those skills.
So now, on top of that, so for the selling of music itself, so we've gone into heavily streaming, and you're talking about playlists before, and you're talking about watching your streams, and we're moving further away from physical copies and all that. So you're on Spotify, and because you're the one who gets to run all of what you're doing, you get to see streams. Now, this has been something, so especially with like Instagram and the social media stuff that you were talking about, the following and how many likes you get on things and how many people download your stuff, it can really play into, especially if you're the one who's putting it out there, it really plays into whether you're good or not. Have you had like anything that you've kind of done for yourself? So especially around release time, if I know I'm going to release something that I thought was really, really good, like, oh, this interview should take off, then it doesn't quite do as much as I did. And I'm like, okay, like, is it because the interview side? Is it timing? Like, there's so many different things that come into it. How do you kind of navigate that? Or is it still something that you're like trying to get on top of?
Probably is still a work in progress, that one.
Yeah.
It's like you say, there's so many different factors that go into why something is quote unquote successful or not. I think for me with streams, like, I've never been on, actually I got my first 2 playlists on an editorial Spotify, and I was so excited. It's stupid how much value that I put on that, because I can remember being so upset, with my record that I poured my life into and all of my finances. It's a real thing that streaming is, while it maybe should create a little bit more income, that it is income. And so if you do get landed on a big playlist, you're obviously going to maybe recoup some costs, which is always good when you're trying to survive. And so I never got playlisted with any of my songs from Wildfires. And I really felt lots of pangs of failure, and I would be so jealous when other people got put on playlists, and it's so silly, and I hate I kind of hate to admit how much it plays on my mind when I'm releasing something. But if you talk to other people, other musicians, you'll find that it's a common theme, because it really is, because you want your song to do the best that it possibly can, and at the moment it's the best and most effective way to get music to the most amount of people. So it's not really, I don't think, an ego thing so much as, everyone gets a bit obsessed with how many followers you have, and often that can be a bit of an ego game. But I think when you actually strip back why people get upset about their stream numbers, it's because it's their work that they've paid for, and that they've spent years honing and all those things. So I think that unfortunately, it is a big part of a musician's life. And then when I got my playlist this year, it wasn't even a huge playlist, but I was still really excited. And I got it and I thought, this has not changed my life. So it's funny how that always happens. And it's easy to say that when that has, when you're on the other side of it. But yeah, it's a big thing. It's not going away. And it's how I listen to music, and I often find new artists and things through playlists. So yeah, it's just part of it. I think.
And knowing all the processes that you do now, how is it that you so like what is the environments that you have to be in to write when you're not writing for that particular outcome? You know what I mean? So I think it'd be easy to be like, okay, this sort of music is the stuff that's making these playlists. I should probably just like cater towards that. So how is it that you find that balance between I'm Jenny writing this to like, how is it that it'll be kind of publicly shared type thing?
Yeah, that's a big problem, I think, that's happening. And I actually wrote about this a lot at uni, is that there actually have been changes in the kind of music that's being released. And you know how there's lots of like chill, coffee chill, or like Sunday chill. So there's actually data that is showing that people are writing chill music.
Oh, damn.
So they're producing music with chill vibes, and they're writing songs that fit that mold. And I think that sounds really horrific, but then when you think about the way that pop music has always happened, it's always been written to suit radio, you know.
Sure.
And so I think it just depends on the era is what people are going to be doing. So I think inevitably people are thinking about that, but I try my very best not to, and I don't think it does come into my writing process too much. I think I used to just write and not even think about the life of the song post writing the song, and I wish that I could still do that now, but I can't. And I always think, how's this going to fit? And for me, it's like, how's this going to fit in the album? Does this sound like this other song? And is there too many songs about this thing? And so definitely I wish I could switch that off. If I could change anything about my writing and creative process, it would be just being in the moment, because I think that's when I write my best stuff. So that comes into it. And and obviously if you're trying to succeed on certain platforms, whether it's, you know, like back in the day, like MTV, that's still a thing, I guess. But I did, you know, people obviously were making music and making music videos to suit MTV. And it's the same thing now, that people are trying to do it because they see that as being the path to success and reaching the most people. And I just try to take it back to live performance always. And I think that's how I cope with my low stream numbers as well, because I'm like, why does that song, you know, why didn't it get on this playlist, or why everything sucks? And then bottom line is that when I play it live, and if I feel that it does connect with people, or someone tells me that it does connect with them, it just doesn't matter until it matters. And then I have to play a live show again. But I think same thing when I'm writing, is like I maybe could write lots of chill songs, but they wouldn't connect with my audience, and it wouldn't feel good when I was playing it. So I think, probably it always comes back to that for me.
And just another one, I just want to see where you're at with this. But so when artists go through evolutions of sound, because they're trying to explore different things, so I get frustrated at people who don't see people who are exploring art. So they're artists and they're just like, oh, it doesn't sound like them. But like they kind of people are going out of their way to kind of change that sound. Has there been ever a time where, so I guess when you're putting things through and you're just like, that's not me, but like this is something I do want to explore, like, or so like, because it's trying to find that balance, right, between you enjoying what you're doing, but then also people who follow you and are loyal fans saying this is still good, or like, oh, I don't like this doesn't remind me of you type thing. Have you ever had that, or known of people who are kind of like that?
Yeah, definitely. I can think of artists that I loved, and then they brought out a new album and I was like, what? And now I love the album, you know? So I think often it is that songs need a few listens if they are different. And it is definitely something, probably with Wildfires I did feel that, because my first album, The Old Oak, was very country, like it's very, very country. And the next, in comparison, I mean, some people would listen to Wildfires and think it was the countryest thing they'd ever heard, but in comparison, they are really different. And I always think there's a few people that I think about when I'm creating music, and I think, what would they think about this?
Wow.
And like Dad is someone that I always
Yeah.
get real scared about showing new stuff, because I really respect what he loves listening to, and I want him to like it. But then at the same time, I'm not going to sound like Johnny Cash, you know. So I think I just have to remember that. And there's also some friends as well that if it doesn't, you know, if they're like, oh, I like the other stuff better, then I actually would be really cut up and probably change it. But like there was one song on the Wildfires called The Ocean, which was, it's quite piano heavy, and I'd never even sung with piano ever. And it was, at the time, I was so scared. I remember being excited because I knew that I loved it, but actually scared, and like I felt kind of sick when I heard the mix, and I thought it was so amazing. But there was that whole "Is This Me?" And there was no acoustic guitar, and we actually did put a little bit of acoustic guitar in the end, but that's a really big part of my sound, because that's how people identify me, because that's how they hear me when I play. And for me, that's how I write them. So in my head, that's how they sound until they are absolutely not that. And so definitely I think it is quite scary, and I think again it comes back to having a good relationship with your producer or whoever you're working with to say, I'm really keen to do this. Or there were definitely situations in Wildfires where I just had to say, this is too much, like it's too much this way, and we need to just pull it back. It's I think it's part of making any album or any song.
Sure.
But being a little bit scared is sometimes good, I think.
It is, yeah. It makes you think about everything that you're doing, and just like properly having some intent behind what you're doing, I guess.
Yeah.
And when you're writing, so, it doesn't even matter. When you're writing, something that, so when I listen to it, and a lot of the stuff that you write, it's like you. It's you're quite honest, and I think if I was to know you personally, I'd see where you were in that space, and then I'd hear the song and be like, I remember when she was in that zone. And then you were talking about your father listening to stuff, and you're worried about what they're going to think, and you know, you're a bit more vulnerable out there because you're putting your feelings into lyrics that people are going to hear. And so some of those people, so for example, my dad listens to my podcast, and it changes the way, so there's some things I really just want to I need to get it out there, but I get really scared that he'll just be like, what's going on here? How do you get over that? Because there are some, you're deep in a lot of it, and you're talking about heartbreak, and as a father, I'm guessing the last thing you ever want is for your daughter to go through that. So how is it that you're just like, it's a song, but it's still me? Yeah,
that is, I actually have a song on the album that is about that, and it's called Thing Called Love, and it's a duet with Dad, and it is actually about the process of a dad watching his girl go through a heartbreak and not really knowing what to do. And I think it's helpful that Dad is a creative, and that both Mum and Dad are really deep emotional people, and they're not people to shy away, they cry all the time and stuff. So, and so do I. So I think I'm lucky in that sense that it doesn't feel like, they know that I get emotional about stuff, and they know that I stress about things, and so I don't think that it is too different to what they know of me as a person. Right. There's definitely things, I suppose, especially in the heartbreak realm, that perhaps, and I think that Mum certainly has said that she learns a lot. When I play a new song, she'll be like, oh, okay, are you okay? And so it's definitely a weird thing. I think that's quite a specific parent to child strange 100%. Thing, especially when you're becoming, not a 12-year-old anymore. Yeah. It's kind of funny, but in some ways I think it's kind of nice, because even if I can't tell them about something that's going on, or I don't feel like I need to tell them, and then they do hear a song, and they feel, and then maybe they'll talk to me about it, and then maybe I'll feel better. Yeah. So it's kind of a weird loop thing, but I definitely think it's a funny thing to balance that. Yeah, and that's a lot of people just don't have a way of expressing how they feel. Yeah. So I mean, you can talk about it, but then you can also make music about it, and as long as someone does check in to be like, are you still doing all good? I heard on the song, or someone will say, I heard on the podcast this happened, are you good? And that's kind of just because you all have your forms of expression. And I think that's kind of cool that you have that sort of relationship with them, because there are a lot of people who will do that. But then I guess what it always does is that it shows that you are you, in your writing, because there's ones where you talk about your family, and you talk about the growth of different family members. And then I think it's Traveling Bones.
you talked about that. That's an interesting concept to me, because I have never felt like I belonged anywhere necessarily, but then I did belong wherever I kind of made my spot. So that song for me, I was like, this is sick. But have you talked to your parents about that song? Because I know it can be quite difficult for people to leave the nest. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
With that one? Yeah.
Yeah. I still get sad.
Right.
I'm not sure why some people cope with it better. I often wonder whether because I only moved 2 hours from home.
Sure.
So I went home a lot. Like my first year I found it very hard. I think everybody does.
Yeah.
But I really did struggle, especially at the start. I think I just didn't know. I mean, as well, I came from a really small school, and everyone knew everyone since we're 5 years old, and that classic I actually didn't know how to make friends. And so I found that really hard. And I remember there's a song that I always play, and it's probably my favourite, and it's called So Far, and it's about leaving home.
Yeah.
And I wrote it just before I left, and I was just so upset about, I just thought that once I left that it would never be the same again, and that when I went home, because I've always lived in the same house, so I've got like this ultra attachment to everything about that area, and and I'm terribly sentimental, so it was so traumatic to leave that. But now I realise that I go home all the time, and they still know who I am. But at the time it feels so, it is such a big moment, I think, leaving home. And I have written about that a lot, and sort of often creeps in, like Travelling Bones is about loving travelling, and how I really, sort of about that I thought when I was this age, because I grew up in Gore where, I mean, it wasn't everywhere, but often it's like you leave school and then you get a job and then you buy a house and then you have a baby. That I thought that was what's going to happen, because, and when you're young, you always think that 20-year-olds or 21-year-olds are so,
oh yeah,
all
get
good.
ready for retirement as well.
Yeah, and so I think it was me realizing that that's a long way away, and that I really wanted to invest in traveling and stuff, and so that's what that song's about. But it's also about missing home, because I always feel like when I'm home I wish I was traveling. And then when I'm traveling, I love it, but I definitely think about mum and dad and the twins and everyone and my friends, and when I'm traveling a lot. I think it happens not because you're like pathetic, but it happens because you do something cool and you wish that someone was there. I always find myself thinking like, Ashton would love this, or Caleb would love this, or whatever. And like my flatmates have been really great through the whole I'm often away and miss birthdays and things like that, and that always makes me really sad. But they are really cool about it. But I always think, man, they would love this, and I guess that's what happens when you solo travel all the time.
It's so interesting, like the ways that we interpret songs. Like you'll hear things and you start to visualize things. So with that song, a lot of it is thinking about what my future's going to look like, and how I got so settled on particular ideas, and then I realized those ideas were not because I wanted them. They were just because that's what I thought was the norm to do. So I started settling, but the real me is like a bit of a rolling stone, and I kind of just need to keep doing things and exploring different ideas. It doesn't necessarily mean that I have to travel, but my mind couldn't get stagnant. So that's kind of what I took away from it. And I was just like,
cool.
How cool is that? So like I said, I've learned a lot about you through your music, and we were talking about this earlier, but like talking to you now, well, now that we have the headsets on, I can hear your singing voice, but it's so cool just to see you in art form and then see you now, and you're not like two separate people. Like you are just you through all of it. And I think a lot of it does come down to the fact that you are the one kind of behind the mechanics of a lot of it, but then you acknowledge a lot of your community as well, which is unbelievable. So I have a final question that I ask everyone. Sorry, 3 hours later.
That's right.
But what is something that you do close to every single day that makes you feel like you have optimized the day? Doesn't have to be every day. It can be like maybe a routine that you do maybe every second, or a couple of times a week.
What do I do? Well, once a week at the moment, I am part of a song club, on yesterday is the deadline. So this morning we get sent an email and it has a prompt.
Okay.
And it might be like a phrase or a word or something. And then before midnight Thursday the next week, we have to write a song and we have to submit it. And everyone listens. There's 10 of us.
Cool.
And some of them are in Nashville and some of them are in Australia and different places. And it's so funny because everyone just goes on a different tangent.
Yeah.
But in terms of feeling like I've optimized my like doing the right thing as a musician. Sometimes if I'm busy, I just don't write anymore. And then I'm like, oh my God, I haven't written anything for 3 months and who am I? And so that's been a really cool thing to be part of because I always feel, even if it's a really average song, I'm still writing and still doing it.
Yeah. It's kind of cool. And just the last question. This is something that I've always been interested in.
Yes.
Are there people who know, like, have you like told people that there is a particular song about them? Or will they just hear it and know?
They would know. I think they would know. And there definitely are people that know.
It's a real thing. It's real.
Oh, it makes me cringe. But yeah, they definitely are, And actually there's a lot of people in my life that hear songs and know, like my friends, and they know exactly who. And unfortunately with, honest writing that does happen.
Yep.
But I've never been like, screw you, I wrote this song.
Yeah.
But and obviously like we were talking about that there's obviously heartbreak relationship songs and those people know what, when and what. But because I write lots about mum and dad and stuff, obviously they know.
Okay, all right. So it's a real thing. So
yes.
When you're listening to music, the ones that kind of hit the most, and when you do get to know people, I guess that you'll kind of go through that because you do see them evolving through that. But Jenny, that has been amazing. Thank you so much for coming on. I hope that was nice for you.
It has been super fun.
Get to chat about everything that you've been up to. And I know you do a lot of interviews and all that sort of stuff, and you're like on Radio NZ and all that. But I hope this kind of allowed you to explore it a little bit more and just have that open platform to be able to speak about that sort of stuff. So I will link everything that you have been up to in the show notes and also on the Instagrams and whatnot, so that hopefully people can go and check your stuff out because it's great stuff. And I'm so proud of everything that you do, and hopefully one day I can resurface that one photo.
Yes, let me know when that happens.
Yeah, and I'll put it up. Awesome. So that has been another episode of the Sick As podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. Stay real.